Hello, my name is Tim Arth, and I work with ACPA, College Student Educators International. My pronouns are he, him, his. And welcome to today's online learning event sponsored by the Commission for Housing and Residential Life. Before we get started, we wanted to introduce you to the Shindig platform, which we're utilizing as part of a partnership with Shindig. This online learning event is captioned, so click on the Click Here for Live Transcription button, and a separate screen will open with the live transcription. During the presentation, you can join video chats with other people attending the webinar by clicking on their picture as a way to engage with others during the presentation. During the presentation, if you'd like to ask a question, you can press the !/ask button and type in a text question. You can also press the raise your hand button to be brought up to the stage to ask a video question. The Shindig room will stay open 30 minutes after the presentation ends for you to engage in video chats with other people attending today's online learning event. ACPA College Student Educators International is the leading comprehensive student affairs association that advances higher education and engages students for a lifetime of learning and discovery. Although serving an international audience, our membership is primarily from the United States, and our offices are headquartered in Washington, D.C. at the National Center for Higher Education. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and sharing of knowledge, ACPA acknowledges the painful history of genocide in the United States for Native, Aboriginal, and Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect the many and diverse tribal nations and peoples who were forcefully removed from, as well as those still connected to, this land. We particularly acknowledge and recognize that the land upon which our international headquarters is located today has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst a number of Indigenous people, including the Akahonak, Pocomoke, Piscataway, Anacostank, Mattapineant, Nangamek, Pamunkey, Tahihunt, Nanticoke, Chickahominy, Monacan, Mattapani, Nansemond, Rappahannock, Anistohini Unami, and Assateague tribal nations as the original occupants of the Washington, D.C. region. ACPA strongly advocates for higher education and student affairs professionals to honor the land, the original tribal occupants, and the history of the place where you are located. Further, we have a responsibility to continually self-educate, reflect, and listen to the histories and people in our areas, including tribal land acknowledgements in practice, and understanding and acknowledging history is not only respectful and educational, it is the justice-oriented advocacy necessary for continuing the work of dismantling the devastating effects of settler colonialism in our society. At this time, we're going to go ahead and bring our presenters up to the stage for today's online learning event. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. So excited that you're all joining us today. Our presentation, Experience, Learn, Change, Educating for Social Justice Through Peer Theater is something that is really special to Dave and myself and many other people here on our campus at UMass Amherst. Next slide, please. Wanted to give folks a brief overview. So starting out with introductions, my name is Carl Blumel. My pronouns are he, him, his. I currently work as the coordinator for selection training and leadership here at UMass Amherst campus. So basically, I oversee a lot of the selection and training processes for our live-in student staff. And one of the exciting partnerships that I get to have with Dave is figuring out ways that we can work with SHAHA, our social justice peer theater troupe, to help educate our students and our student staff here on campus.
And hello, nice to see you all. My name is Dave Neely. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm the Diversity Education and Training Specialist here at UMass Amherst, where my work comes together with residence education colleagues and many other colleagues across student affairs and across the campus, really to continue our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've had the opportunity to work with the SHAHA Theater Troupe, SHAHA the Storytellers, for about the past 6 years in some different roles. And again, excited to be able to pull back the curtain and share with you all, some of how we do that wonderful work with many students on our campus.
So going over the rest of the overview, as Dave mentioned, we're going to be sharing some of how we do the work that we do, wanting to give folks a little bit of historical context about Shaha the Storyteller, so you kind of understand where that sits with our campus, talk a little bit about the pedagogical approach, so kind of the academia behind what it is that we're doing and how we make sure that we're using effective strategies, talking about the impact of peer education through peer theater. One of the things that I think folks will really get a lot out of is the evolution of the performance workshop model and where we've come from, where we're going, where we're at now, because it is useful on different types of campuses depending on the type of engagement you're looking for. And then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of things and talk about a year in the life of Shaha the Storyteller. So talking about the logistical aspects of everything from recruiting folks to join the cast to assessing at the end and celebrating with our students. And at the end, we'll wrap up with some key considerations and things to think about if you're trying to bring something like this to your campus, or maybe you're trying to evolve something that already exists on your campus, as well as leave time for questions and answers at the end. Next slide.
Wonderful. So I want to give you a little bit of a background about who Shaha is. The full name of our group is Shaha the Storytellers. Shaha is a Swahili word for storyteller. And that name has been with the group since it started in 2001. It's actually something that we've had continued conversations with the cast members, knowing that we're using a Swahili word. And in our recent conversations with the cast, many of our students from the African diaspora and Black students have requested that we keep that name in place as a part of our legacy and what it does represent to the group. We started in 2001 before Carl and I were here, and it was started as a student affairs project within residence education to be a primary diversity education initiative for the students who live in our residence halls. It also brought together academic affairs partners, particularly in the social justice education concentration in our College of Education, to actually pull together a course structure and curriculum to be able to support the development and kind of the practicum experience of the student cast members themselves. We wanted to acknowledge a few of the people who are not here with us today, starting with the student cast members, many of them who are in class right now. We had an invitation to try to include a couple of our returners, but that wasn't possible. So they shared last Friday that they would love to be a part of a short video to say hello to you. So if we can pull up that video, here's the group. So thank you for having a chance to acknowledge the group, even though it wasn't live, but we wanted to bring them into the space. They really are the energy and the amazing educators who bring this work to life. And so we're so grateful for this current cast and all the casts over the past 18 years. We also work with graduate staff. We have two incredible graduate staff members this year, Renee Cruz and Sabine Jacques, who are supporting the group, both in terms of theater development and also in terms of social justice education and project coordination. Really couldn't do what we do without them as well. And we wanted to briefly acknowledge the founders of the program. Anjali Kadena and Tanya Williams in Student Affairs came together and brought in Maurianne Adams from the Social Justice Education program to be able to really set the foundations of our group. And they did that in a really intentional and thoughtful way, which I think is one of the reasons we are still here so many years later. So thank you for letting us bring a little bit of the background of the group to you all. Next slide, please. So I'll admit, Carl and I both love theory a little bit, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this today unless it comes back up in questions and answers, but wanted to give you a sense of kind of how we approach this work. And so two kind of broad frameworks that inform what we do are social justice education. And in particular, thinking about how social justice education theorizes oppression and resistance to oppression, how that happens through a system at different levels. So the individual level, right, in ourselves, the institutional level, the institutions we're a part of, including higher education, and the social cultural levels. And so that's important to kind of the ways that we frame our work. And then the third idea that is really crucial to social justice education is that what we do is both content, it's the what we do, the content of our scripts, the topics that we cover, the knowledge that we share, but also important is the process, how we do that, how are our ways of being non-oppressive, more possible, more focused on healing and more focused on connecting. And so we are always thinking about how we're bringing both content and process into the considerations with the group. And then the other, it's not the only, kind of pedagogy that frames what we do is theater of the oppressed. And so coming from the work of Augusto Boal, a popular educator in Brazil, who built a lot of his work around the work of Paulo Freire, but really helping us re-understand theater as being something that's not only actors and audiences, but how we're all connected in theater activities. So the phrase there, spect actors, is one way that we think about how everyone who's a part of our performance workshop are both spectating in terms of at some points they're engaging by reflecting and seeing scenes and thinking about those things on their own. And then they become actors themselves as we invite them to envision new possibilities for the social situations that we're in. And so our cast is very thoughtfully connecting our participants in thinking about what we do around issues of racism, classism, sexism, religious oppression, disabilities, and other forms of oppression, and ways that we can build paths forward, knowing that we need to be able to look at our own situations and understand them in order to come up with opportunities to transform the realities that we're in. Cool, next slide.
So as Dave mentioned, one of the things that we like to think about as we go through this journey is really thinking not just about the content, but also about the process, and some of the work that's informed how we do what we do really takes into consideration how we involve the audience as more than just an audience. And I think this quotation really speaks to that. Theater is the most perfect artistic form of coercion. And when Boal was talking about this, what he was saying was that the traditional sense of theater of there's an audience, and then there are spectators, there's this wall between them. So all this knowledge or content or whatever it is that's going on stage, the feelings that they're trying to evoke are being forced on the audience without any type of real organic engagement. And I think when I reflect on this quotation, it speaks perfectly to kind of where we have organically grown based on the needs and requests and input from the folks that we perform for and with. And we'll talk about a little bit about that now. Next slide, please. So thinking about how we have evolved this process, we know just in general, peer-to-peer education is one of the most impactful things that our students engage with. Learning from peers often gives them a sense of agency about their own learning, as well as being able to relate to people that they're gaining knowledge from and gaining experiences with. So peer theater in of itself at a base level is really impactful because it's not just staff administrators saying, here's this thing or doing this thing for them. It's peers who they might live right next door to or see in the dining hall, engaging in something that they really value and find important. And I think that lends itself really well to that type of education. But as we continued to do these performances, some of the things that started impacting the way that we developed our process is we would hear about specific needs in a community. So maybe there was a bias incident or something that happened in a residence hall, and we would hear that feedback and think, how can we shift what it is that we're doing to adjust what we're performing about so it covers those topics and maybe gives folks some tools to to deal with that situation. Obviously, with social media and connectedness via forms of technology, folks are more aware than ever of local and national events and international events. So what are the trends and things that are going on around us that maybe aren't getting talked about necessarily in a curriculum in a classroom, but people are talking about just because they're engaging with that? And we're hearing those things come in from the people in our audience, as well as our cast members who are saying, like, talking about, are we going to do something about potentially the upcoming election? Or did you see the protests that are going on here, or here? Or did you hear about this thing that's going on here? And how do we deal with that? How do we process that? And bringing that into the fold. And then one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is just in general, our assessment. Some of the things that our audience was calling for is really more engagement, not just saying we're not getting the content or we would like a different piece of content, but we would really like to know how to deal with a situation when someone commits a microaggression, or when we see something going on and we're not sure if it's something that we should address, but how do we identify that? And then who do we talk to about that? And what are some things that we can say to engage with? So these were all things that were coming from people that we were performing for. And what this really led to is a shift from this transactional performer audience model that Bilal was referring to as coercive, and more of an experiential model where, yes, we do some performance, but we start from the very beginning engaging our students, and Dave will talk about a little bit about our process in a second, but really engaging them right from the get-go. So it's not just you're coming to see a play, but you're coming to this workshop, you're going to watch us perform some things, but we're going to bring you on stage, we're going to figure out how to get you involved, we're going to hear your questions, we're going to dialogue, we're going to talk about those things. So all of the feedback that we were getting really led us on this organic process over a course of several years to where we are now. Next slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So we're going to now bring you a little bit more into the details of what our performance model, what our workshop model looks like. And as we're moving through this webinar, I kind of think about it as a funnel. We've gone from pretty broad and theoretic. We're going to be getting more and more nuts and bolts as we go. So if you're wondering more about the how, we are headed right in that direction. So on the left side of the screen there, we have what our original model looks like. And this is much of what the group looked like when I came into the group about 6 years ago. So the group would perform scenes. We would welcome the audience in at the beginning, hand them a playbill that had, bios of the cast and the lists of the scenes that were to come. Really felt like a show, as Carl mentioned, like you were coming to see a play in your residence hall lounge, right? In the basements, in the lounges, in the libraries. Just coming in to see a show. And then at the end of the show, there'd be some question and answer with the audience, usually a nice question and answer between the actors in the audience. And usually great conversations, where did these scenes come from? What does it feel like to play this character? Those kind of things, but not really digging much into the content of topics of the scenes themselves. We do a little bit of assessment and we'd wrap up the performance. And so over the last 5 or 6 years, what we've done is moved more towards a workshop model where the cast members are also the facilitators of the learning. And so they're facilitating dialogue and they're facilitating interactive theater activities. And initially, all of that started at the end of the scene. So we still kind of came in, performed scenes, and then we facilitated more small group dialogues towards the end of the shows. What we thought was important was to really flip the whole script, really flip the whole engagement so that as soon as someone came into the space, they were experiencing us as students, as people, not only as actors who were somehow separate from them. So we do some introductions. We involve everybody in the room in those introductions. We usually have something fun in there, like what's your favorite sea creature or what kind of cupcake would you be? So trying to break the ice and just bring people together at first. And then we share some community agreements, some guidelines we have to have a space that's a little safer and a little bit braver. An energizer, so if there are other theater folks in the room or icebreaker lovers, you may know the game Zip Zap Zop. We play Zip Zap Zop, which is an energy game to kind of move energy around in a circle and bring people in, and then move into our scenes. So we've done all of this beforehand to create a little bit of a more trusting learning community and to kind of decrease that distance between the group and the audience. Afterward, and Carl will talk a little bit more about this later, we move into forum theater exercises in which we revisit a scene. So we revisit part of a scene, we act it out, and then we invite the participants who have been, watching to actually come in and join in potential interventions. Oftentimes that's been about racism or classism, microaggressions, coming in and being like, if I really heard this in my lounge, if I really heard this in the dining hall, like, what would I do? And inviting people to play and experiment with what's possible and have conversations about it. We do a short assessment so that we have a sense of what the group is doing. We'll talk more about that later, and then bring the group to a whole closing through like a one-word closing round about one thing that folks are taking away or one way that they're feeling. So that's the workshop model as we have it today. And could you bring up the next slide, please? Great. So here we're gonna walk through what a whole year looks like in the program. We've talked about, really kind of the end product, if you will, what we're doing in terms of the workshop, but how does that fit within the life cycle of the group? So on these next 6 slides, we're going to talk about how all of these things unfold. And they don't unfold in this order. We went ahead and numbered them because it's kind of nice to have a sequence that's a little bit linear, but absolutely many of these things are overlapping. We are always developing and editing scripts even while we're performing. And we are celebrating with the group while we are, rehearsing, while we are facilitating workshops. So these things are not always happening exactly in the sequence, but gives you a sense of how we move through a year. And can we have the next slide? So obviously one of the most important things is that we have outstanding, incredible, passionate people who are a part of the group. We do that through a lot of thoughtful recruitment. We oftentimes put out posters like the one that's on the screen there, send those out through residence education, through student organizations, through other channels to kind of to spread the word broadly. But in particular, we attend events such as our Multicultural Center's Cultural Connections event in the fall, and other events to really be able to recruit students from all different kinds of backgrounds, whether or not they have theater experience, to come and join us. And we get an incredible mix of folks who may be really passionate about social justice or diversity, or they've been thinking about making change in their high schools, or making change in their high schools or on campus. We have folks who are theater lovers, they're actors, or they're folks who had acted or performed in high school and want to come back to that. And to be honest, we oftentimes get a lot of folks that are in that sweet spot of both, where we're always thrilled to see how many students come out to audition for us that actually say, I'm passionate about these topics, I'm studying some of these topics, and I'm interested in theater, storytelling, and performance. But sometimes people are stronger in one of those than the other, and that's okay. We don't need everyone who comes into our group to be an outstanding actor or an outstanding writer, or to have extreme depth of knowledge around social justice education or diversity topics, but we do expect that they have some background in those areas, and most students on our campus already do from their diversity education requirements. At times, we do also offer a prerequisite course called Educating for Social Justice and Diversity through Peer Theater, which is a course that specifically prepares student cast members. So when we have enough students interested in running that course, we do teach that one as well. So after we have a group, oh, and I would say also that our cast members are involved in the audition process. They're there to welcome folks. They're there at the table to run scenes with students who are auditioning, to ask them questions. We have a series of questions that we ask each person who's interested in joining the group, and they help share their input about the people who audition in terms of, you know, what their strengths are, what some areas of growth might be. And so they largely inform, though not necessarily decide, who does enter the cast. And so there's that really important role they play of welcoming others into the cast and having some voice in that process. As we get started, we spend a good bit of time in the fall. It's kind of the phase that we're in right now of developing community agreements and shared language around important terms. So we often we unpack terms in really dialogic, experiential ways to think about things like, what is dialogue? What is social justice? What is diversity? What is performance? What is privilege? So that we have a shared understanding in our group, not only a book definition, since those are topics that we are talking about every time that we get together. We have cast handbooks, and those handbooks are not only some of the existing scripts, but our community agreements, expectations of the group, and some resources for facilitation and dialogue. So handbooks that we put together every year. And then we come together for a cast retreat. It was actually last Friday. The video that I shared was from the end of that retreat. And we spend time learning to dialogue and practicing dialogue and in some structured form of storytelling. So we actually just had a beautiful circle of storytelling, writing, and sharing important stories about identities, particularly sharing stories about othering and belonging. Just last Friday, that really helps to do a few things. It brings the group together in really meaningful ways. It also allows us to know more about each other. That's really important in acting out the scenes. And it creates a pathway to writing new scenes based on the students' experiences. I don't think we've mentioned this clearly yet, but the scenes that we perform are student written. And so those beginnings of storytelling that we do during the retreat kind of plant seeds for people to write scenes moving forward. I think we're ready for the next slide. So as we're thinking about building community, I just wanted to bring in another way that we do that. We oftentimes utilize social media. These are some awesome drawings or illustrations that were done by one of our former cast members, Jonah, but to share a little bit more about the cast with other students on our campus. And so yeah, in terms of building our cast community, we also want others to get to know us a little bit, so that there's that kind of reciprocity about, like, we want to get to know people that we work with, and we want them to have a chance to get to know us. Thanks. Next slide.
All right, so talking about the scripts, which I think a lot of people would see as some of the heart of what it is that we do, but I think it really goes back to what Dave was speaking about, building that community and sharing that understanding and building connections. I think that's the meat, and developing the scripts and performing those scripts is one of the ways that they build those connections and make sure they're engaging with other folks. And as Dave mentioned, all of our scripts are student written. It's really, really amazing, the work and the passion that our students bring to the table when it comes to figuring out how to share what it is that they want to say and what vehicle they use for that. Currently, we have an archive that is ever growing of about 30 to 35 scripts that we use with performances, exchanging some in, changing others out, kind of depending on what's going on and what students or what the cast as a whole want to say, or potentially what our community needs. We can go into the archive and see if there's a piece that really speaks to that allows for us to engage in a very specific way and connect with residents in a very specific way about things they want to talk about or skills they want to build. Typically in any given performance, we use between 7 to 10 scripts for the performance workshop. It really depends on what is resonating with folks, as well as we always have to be cognizant of time. I'm sure all of us would love to have 7 or 8 hours to perform and engage with these things and talk about these things, but usually we're capped at about 90 minutes overall, sometimes up to 2 hours, but really need to be cognizant of making sure that what it is that we're performing leaves enough time to really build and engage with our students. And they run the gamut really from spoken word pieces to songs or musical pieces, more artsy pieces that are kind of more an aesthetic than like an overt critique on something, as well as traditional, and I put that in quotation marks because I don't know if there's really a traditional sense of theater, but traditional scripted scenes or skits that you might experience. They can range anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes up to 10 to 12 minutes for some of our longer story-based scenes. So as we've mentioned, all of our scripts are student written and revised. And the other thing is they're based on personal experiences. And it's important to note that because our students are sharing these and giving them to the cast and working with Shaha, we do our best to make sure that we note who those folks who are doing the majority of the writing and sharing are. So once they leave the group or graduate, we can loop back around with them to say, hey, it's been a couple of years and we were thinking about potentially editing the script. We know this is based around your experience, so want to get the okay from you, maybe to update a couple things. Or are you okay with us still performing this even if you're not part of the group anymore? Because they do really have some ownership and put a lot of heart and emotion and time and energy into that. We want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to respect what it is that they were looking to do with those pieces. I think one of the things to note is things have gotten a lot easier with the advent of technology, as we can now literally be in the middle of a rehearsal and say, actually, we need to change this, instantly stop, bring it up in a shared document and do typing right into that. And because our students have gone from having a thick binder of scripts to oftentimes just bringing things up on their phone, like that live update immediately goes to what it is that they're reading off of. And it makes for a more streamlined and organic performance space in getting right back into things. I think overall, the majority of our pieces often focus on one identity. And I mean, I think we all know that it's very difficult to think about how we include every single identity and address them fully to the amount that they deserve to have the spotlight in that. But while they focus on one identity, I think one of the other things is we bring in a lot of different identities and intersectionality based on who's in our cast. So the opportunities for actors to not just say, well, maybe I do hold this identity or this racial or sexual orientation identity or gender identity. And that's like not even what we're talking about in this skit, but let's talk about how some of these other identities I'm holding are actually impacting the way that we're engaging or that we're potentially writing in scripts or skits or the dialogues that we're doing. I think the other thing to note that we are really, really intentional about is exactly what a skit is about and exactly the identities that we hold and how we then either perform or don't perform some pieces because we never want to give anyone in the audience the idea that it's okay to pretend to be something you're not and try and say that you're you understand fully the experience of someone who may be a different race than you or a different gender than you. So we're very careful about what scripts we use when we're selecting them to this say, does anyone in the cast actually hold an identity or feel comfortable performing that identity? And then if not, how do we still engage in conversations around those topics to make sure that we're not leaving them completely out of the conversation? And sometimes we will go to table reads and we will very openly let our audiences know that we are reading from a script because we don't believe that performing an identity that we hold is something that we should do. So we're really careful about the balance between performance and where the scripts are taking us at the same time to make sure that we're doing justice as well as honoring all the identities in the space. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about performing and facilitating. So Dave kind of walked through this format already, but wanted to dig in a little deeper and possibly like pose some new things that might engage you all with some different questions at the end. So as Dave mentioned, cast and participant introductions, just standard things, name, class year, fun fact. One of the things that I think SHAHA and SHAHA cast members have been really amazing about is role modeling pronoun sharing. Obviously, we don't want to force anyone who doesn't feel comfortable necessarily to out themselves about their gender identity, but I think us role modeling as a cast often helps to create that safer and braver space so that folks might feel a little bit more comfortable to engage in that conversation. And also provide the opportunity for them not to share if they don't feel comfortable sharing that. So I think it's really important that we have those conversations with our cast beforehand to talk about what that role modeling might look like and how they can do some education around that, as well as engage with folks before, during, and after the performance if they have questions or want to connect with folks. When it comes to the community agreements, I think we've all been in spaces where we start with a blank sheet and we say, what do people want our community agreements to be? And you're met with a deafening silence, lack of engagement. One of the things we do is provide a short list of like pre-constructed agreements, walk through those, but also make sure that we're trying to pull things from the audience as well and make sure that they feel comfortable offering up or asking questions about what one of those community agreements might be or mean, to make sure that it really reflects who is in that space. Because as we all know, when we say something like, let's have respect as a community agreement, if you have 10 people in the room, you're likely to have 10 different definitions of what respect means. So really making it a space where people feel comfortable to say, actually, let's talk about this for a few minutes and make sure that we're all on the same page. How are we going to address microaggressions that might occur as we're having a dialogue and make sure that we're still building those connections? Or how do I feel comfortable asking a question if I have no context or understanding about what that piece of content is? So really making sure that while we have some core community agreements, we're really getting into a conversation about what that looks like with every individual group that we're talking with. Then when it comes to the Energizer theater games, Dave mentioned Zip Zap Zop. We're really just trying to help people get over the either I'm too cool to be in this space or I'm very nervous being in this space, and really just trying to get everyone in a circle, seeing other people, engaging other people, and really putting us all on the same level so that they understand this isn't really just we've come in to do something and you're here to receive this. It's more of a we're going to go through this process together and really make sure that we get the energy up as high as possible so that people are more willing to engage. As I mentioned, we usually use about 7 to 10 skits or pieces in any given performance, and that's really dependent on what the cast feels they're able to perform. It takes into account the amount of time that we're having, as well as kind of what's going on in the world around us, both at a local, national, and international level, about what types of things really need to be addressed and what are going to be viable options to then engage folks with via forum theater, which I think has become one of the most exciting parts of the SHAHA workshop experience. As Dave mentioned, we will revisit one scene. The cast goes through it and then stops. And then we start to invite people who are there at the workshop in the audience to try out different interventions. There is always that awkward hurdle getting the first person up on stage, but I think our cast does a really amazing job of facilitating that and making sure that we're not just pitting it one against these actors, but let's make this real world. So sometimes it's 1 or 2 or 3 people confronting a situation or engaging in that scene together to make sure that they feel comfortable doing that. Sometimes they change it up and say, what would you do now? Let's pause it. Does anyone have a suggestion for something I could say? So really trying to gauge where people are at in that experience and see who's willing to come up. Is this more of a dialogue that we need to have? Do we need to slowly build the confidence of people in the audience to engage with us. And then the other thing that's really impactful about this experience is I think our cast does an amazing job of making every scenario as realistic as possible. There are some ground rules when folks engage. So one of the things that they always tell participants is that when you come in and you step into the scene that you're going to be doing, you can't just like wave a magic wand and make someone not racist or sexist or homophobic anymore. Like you actually have to engage in some type of intervention and how that's going to work. You can't just pull that person out and pretend that they're not here anymore and make the situation okay. So they lay these ground rules so that people know that we're trying to make this as potentially real as possible. And they also don't just let things happen and get solved in any scene. So they don't make it overly difficult, but they're really great about making sure that sometimes you are successful because you said something that clicked with one of the actors that said, you know what, actually, I would stop and reflect if I was being like committing a microaggression, and I would stop and reflect on my behavior and change it. And sometimes someone tries something that you might think would be really amazing intervention, and the cast member is like, actually, the emotions that I'm having right now tell me I'm going to shut down and I'm not going to engage with you and I'm going to walk away. So they've really made it something that isn't just like a B, C, D, you're done. But they take different paths everywhere so that there's more conversation so that people feel like, you know what, I don't know if I can solve this in real life, but at least I have 1, 2, 3, 4 things to say if I ever confront something like this. And I understand how someone might respond, and I know how to hold my own emotions right now so that in that situation, I'm a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more likely to intervene. Then we get to assessment, and I think this is something, I believe Dave's going to talk about this in a couple slides, but this is where we continue to gain information about how we change and evolve our process. So what are things that work for you as a participant and audience member? What are some topics that you didn't see us cover that we might not even know we missed? Or what is a topic that we did cover that you think we need to do differently or like talk about more? And it's really those things that let us be very nimble and quick about adjusting the way that we do the work that we do and understanding the topics and content that we need to bring to people and what they're asking for. Finally, I think the closing round is really important because it really captures that space one last time and brings everyone together like on an equal playing field to say, we all just went through this experience together, and you can be feeling great or bad, or maybe you don't know how you're feeling, but like let's share that and name that into the space and know that it's okay to name that into the space regardless of what that feeling is or where you're at right now. And one last quick thing before I pass it back over to Dave, I neglected to mention another really amazing thing about this overall model is students write the scripts, they perform the scripts, and they are actually the ones who facilitate 90% of the workshop. So they go through that facilitation training and experience to understand how to do that. And again, that's where that peer-to-peer impact comes in about it's not just staff administrators standing up in front of you saying, this is how you deal with X, but students helping students through that process of understanding and engagement and growth. And I think it's just, I'm going to stop gushing now, but really amazing experience. Next slide, please.
Great, and thank you, Carl, for naming the importance of student facilitation. Another reason we moved into utilizing Forum Theater was because of one of our student cast members. And so I just want to bring their name into the space too. So EJ, as a student from a couple of years ago who had been studying Forum Theater, leading some Forum Theater and Theater of the Oppressed activities and troops on their own. And they were really instrumental in helping us bring some of that interaction to the group and helping to prepare some of the other facilitators as they were facilitating the group themselves. So we also had opportunities about 6 years ago to bring amazing teachers from the Theater of the Oppressed Laboratory in New York City to do workshops with the group. So it's always been something the SHA has been interested in and drawing on, but I want to give credit back to students for making the difference in terms of encouraging us and making it possible for us to make some of those really meaningful changes that we've made. So we want to talk a little about celebration. We deal with a lot of struggle and pain and oppression in our lives. Our students do, the students in the cast are navigating many of the microaggressions in their lives, and sometimes larger than microaggressions, that we are working to educate others about. And so another part of our work is really creating a liberatory space and a place to celebrate one another and our contributions. The photo here is a group lunch that we had when we were in Boston for the ACPA convention earlier this year. Unfortunately, again, you're getting the webinar version of our performance workshop. When we were live in Boston, it was the students themselves that facilitated, probably about 60 or 70% of that workshop, and they were the ones answering the Q&A. So hopefully we'll be able to continue to bring the group to ACPA or other conferences where you can engage in a workshop yourself. And we were grateful for the brave staff colleagues who joined us in actually doing the Forum Theater activities themselves. But anyway, I just wanted to reference that picture comes from our time in Boston for the ACPA convention. We do end of the semester dinners. We celebrate folks as they graduate, and we celebrate one another. So whether that's through cards or notes or structured activities where we're giving each person a note that appreciates something that they bring to the group, that's something we do. And then as facilitators, we try to bring in mementos or small gifts, as the group's moving from rehearsing into performing. It's a little rock, a lucky rock that says, you rock, something. Anyway, we have all sorts of, and those things may sound silly, but, as you're having those moments, sharing kind words for another, having meaningful traditions. I'm always surprised when tears come to people's eyes because of, there's a lucky rock that they're going to keep in their pocket as they move forward in performance or something like that. So celebrating in big ways and small ways is really important to the work that we do. Next slide, please. Briefly, assessment is something that's been core to the group and to our work for many years. It's allowed us to continue to tell the story of success and the story of the impact that the group makes. Our current assessment form, it's actually, you can see, you probably can't read the questions, but it's about a half sheet of paper. The questions that are there focus on what are you taking away from this workshop experience that you can use. Many of our workshops are with other student staff, so we are facilitating workshops with other residence assistants and peer mentors who live and work in our residence halls. And so we're asking them, what's new for you that you'll be able to use in your position? What are you learning from this experience that you can actually do something with? And then also formative assessment about what did we do that supported your learning, or what could we do that could better support your learning? With the help of amazing cast assistants, we're able to turn those feedback forms around really quickly. We still use a paper form because, hey, that's how we get really high response rates. We get, close to 100% response rates on paper forms, as opposed to who knows what if we sent an online form, afterward. And so we're able to get that feedback right back to the cast, unfiltered, so that the group can, hear that and think about what are next steps. We also have feedback and assessment, kind of circles with our group after every workshop. So we don't have a lot of time, but we circle up and we base our group conversations around two things. It's a plus and a delta. So the plus is what went well, what things do we need to keep doing, appreciating what happened within that workshop. And then the deltas are things that we want to change moving forward. So we don't use a model of kind of what worked, what didn't. It's what worked and what could we change to work better or work differently. So we really try to be solution minded and kind of really looking at the assets and the strengths that we have more than deficits, that we're always a group that's in process. Thank you. Next slide, please. Here are just a couple of quotes from some of the feedback that we received from our workshop participants last spring. I'll just pause a second for you to take a chance to look at those quotes. Actually, I think we have captioning, but want to make sure that that folks are able to engage with these. So I will actually quickly read through them. The first is that intent does not mean impact. Even though some of the characters did not mean to make people feel uncomfortable, their actions still needed to be checked. It's really important to be aware of the language you're using and how it will impact people. The next quote is, don't be afraid to stand up when you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So giving people a little bit more confidence that they need to be able to intervene when something is happening. And then finally, this workshop supported me by allowing me to grow and learn alongside my peers. And that speaks to, or really reminds us of the importance of peer-to-peer education. And not only having the scenes performed, but having the conversations facilitated by other peers. And oftentimes students who are residence assistants themselves and work in the residence halls, and they're also in the cast, or certainly most of the student cast members who live in the halls themselves. So there's not much distance between them in terms of the roles that they play on campus. Can we have next slide, please?
Excellent. So I will try and be as informative and brief as possible in case any of y'all have questions. So wanted to talk about some things just from a logistical and administrative standpoint to take into consideration if you're thinking about either implementing something like this, or if you're trying to think about how to rejuvenate or potentially change something that you're currently doing. So one of the key components is compensation. We are fortunate enough to be really well funded and have the opportunity to actually pay our cast members. So they get an hourly rate for a set amount of hours per week, and then additional if we have additional performances, or if there's something like they're going to a conference to perform there, how do we make sure that if they are taking a couple of hours out of their weekend or something like that, they're being compensated for that. As we know that this could potentially take away from them having a job somewhere else if they need to support themselves. It's definitely adding stress to their life in one way, shape, or form, both positive and potentially challenging stress. So thinking about compensation overall, we know not every institution has a viable way to necessarily pay everyone for the work that they're doing in a monetary sense. So what are the other options that you have to really make this enticing for folks, or to make them know that this is worthwhile for them, or like help them feel appreciated in that sense? So whether it be monetary payment or potentially course credit, or is there a certificate program? What are the things that your campus and your students on your campus really appreciate, to say, this isn't just another club or organization I'm doing, but like this is some really hefty work that I'm doing, and the university understands that and is really making sure that they're doing right by us and thanking us for our time and appreciating us for our time. So as Dave and I mentioned, we are now collaborating on how to integrate this in educational models for our staff. Originally, one of the things that Shaha was doing was just doing open performances in halls based on our old program model. Since our university has moved to a curricular approach to the engagements and initiatives that we do, UMass being so large, it is very difficult to get a cast of 8 to 12 to perform for 13,000 on-campus students. So we're thinking about, like, how do we still have that impact for our residents, and how do we give this education and roll it out in a different way? And one of the ways we're thinking about that is we have 500 student staff members. We can probably get to most of them. So how do we engage and ensure that the same experience or a similar experience is being held by everyone that we're performing for? And how do we have as many touch points as possible, so that in theory, our RAs and peer mentors would go through this experience and have a couple more tools that they would use, and they would be able to share that out with their residents when they're engaging or perhaps intervening or having those conversations out in the hall. So really being cognizant of the way that a group like this would interface with your university. What are the barriers to how you're going to engage, and what are some of the other different ways that you can engage that really still have a huge impact? Care and support for cast. I think Dave mentioned this. You don't separate from your identity, and when you're talking about identity, even if you find that work fulfilling, it's still exhausting. So what is the emotional impact that is being had on the folks that you're working with, the cast that you have, as well as the advisors and the professional staff members or the graduate students who are working with that cast? I think it's one of those things that is a tricky balance, especially depending on compensation. Like, obviously, our cast is getting paid, but that doesn't mean we can say, just deal with whatever you're dealing with. We're paying you, because that in and of itself is oppressive. So how do you really say, cool, we understand that there might be some compensation involved, but we also know that the drain on you as a student and a person is really high. And we need to say, maybe we cancel a performance this week and just have a conversation and dialogue and make sure we hold a space for folks. What are the other supports that are available to your cast members, and how are they connected elsewhere on campus so that they have multiple touch points and not just one organization to make sure that they're processing through those things, or they're connected with folks who share identities that are similar to them so that they don't always have to be educating folks, but can sometimes be the recipient of that support and often be the recipient of that support as well. So really making sure that you're doing those check-ins and making sure that people feel comfortable about naming something out into the space when you're doing a rehearsal and saying, like, I'm just done for the day. Can anyone cover me doing this? Or can we just take a 15-minute break or a 30-minute break or whatever needs to happen in that instance of rehearsal throughout the week and throughout the month and year. And finally, I think maintaining space as dialogic and dynamic. I think you've seen the evolution of where we've come from, where we're at now, and potentially where we might go to. I think it's really, really important that while, yes, there's obviously an arbitrary hierarchy placed into all of these things that we do with our students because there's titles and positional authority and whatnot. When you have this type of group, it's really important that the conversation stays as a group conversation where everyone has equal input and equal energy, or allowed to have equal energy going into like what it is that you're doing and striving for and how you're presenting that. If you start shutting cast members down, they're less likely to be as engaged and less likely to really think critically about how they're engaging and what they want to say and how they want to say it. So making sure that we're empowering everyone in the organization and the group that we're working with to say, yes, technically I'm an advisor, or technically there's this discrepancy between us, but your opinion and the knowledge that you hold and the story that you're sharing is really important, and we need to continue sharing those things, and we need to keep engaging with those points to make sure that we don't stay stagnant when we need to be moving forward and making sure that we're addressing as many issues and the right issues at any given point in time as possible. And it's really tricky to have that balance because those conversations can often turn in very drastic ways that you might not expect, in challenging ways. So making sure that like you're also on that side of things too, and making sure that you give them the direction that they need to be as successful as possible. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next slide. And any questions that folks might have about any of the things that we just went through?
Hi all, this is Tim Arth again with ACPA. I wanted to remind you, if you had any questions, you can press the !/ask button or press the raise your hand button to ask a video question.
It's okay too if you don't have questions. We won't be offended.
Hi all, Tim Arth again. Considering we won't have any questions, we will go ahead and wrap up today's online learning session at this point. So we wanted to go ahead and thank Dave and Carl for presenting a great session today. The Commission for Housing and Residential Life will receive a recording of this webinar and will be able to connect with those who registered for today about the recording of the webinar and distributing that. And then in addition to that, we actually do have time, just to let you all know, we have received a couple of responses from the audience just saying thank you very much. So just let you know, definitely appreciate that. For those who are in the audience who want to go ahead and connect with others, the room will stay open. The room will stay open for another 30 minutes if you want to connect in that way. But At this time, we will be ending today's webinar. So again, thank you all very much for participating today and have a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.